Good morning, everyone. In this video, I'm going to be talking about adoption processes for kittens in foster care. I've been doing adoptions for kittens for almost 13 years now, and a very frequent question I get asked is, how do you find homes for kittens and match them with a good adopter? By the end of this video, you'll have tons of tips on how to write an adoption application, how to have a productive conversation with potential adopters, and how to match your kittens with a wonderful forever home. Now keep in mind, if you're fostering through a rescue or shelter, they're gonna have an adoption process in place already, so you really don't need to know the things that are gonna be in this video. If you're fostering through an organization, the most you'll probably have to do is provide some adorable photos and provide a written bio for the kittens. I have another video that covers those things, so if you want to learn how to take adorable photos and write a great bio for your kittens, then watch the video that I'll link right here. But if you're fostering on your own and you're looking for advice on how to conduct an application process and have a conversation with adopters, this is the video for you. Keep in mind that there are lots of different philosophies on how to conduct an adoption process, and not all organizations will or should have the same process. The process for a small foster-based rescue might be different from the process for a large municipal shelter, and that makes sense because they have different needs and different challenges. So what I'm talking about in this video is my personal experience of running adoption programs and what I think might be helpful to you if you're an independent rescuer or somebody running a small rescue looking to create your adoption application and your adoption process. I think it's important to go into adoptions with a very open mind. Sometimes people can be very picky or have a specific adopter in mind, and it actually does a disservice to the animals. So throughout this process, I encourage you to keep an open mind and assume the best about people. Remember, our goal here is a family for every cat and a cat for every family. The adoption process that I prefer is two parts. It starts with a written application and then moves on to a personal conversation. The application is really just about information gathering, and the conversation is where you can have a chance to really get to know the person and clarify any questions you have from the application. In terms of logistics, you're going to need to create an adoption application online. So you're gonna hop on your computer, and what I recommend is Google Forms. There's a lot of different ways you can create applications, but Google Forms just works really nicely. It's super simple to create, and you can just embed it on your website or even just send it out as a link. You can go into Google Forms and create an application where people can easily input their answers, hit submit, and then it will all populate into a spreadsheet in Google Drive that you can access. Let's take a quick look at how to do that. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly show you how to use Google Forms. If you search Google Forms, you're going to find this link. And from here, you just want to click Go to Forms or sign up for free if you don't have an account. Once you're here, you can see all of your different forms. Obviously, I have a lot of different forms, but we're going to start a blank one together so I can just show you quickly the functionality of how to create it. So up here, you can put your title, and then here you can put your form description. So this is where you might want to put information for adopters. And now we can start to fill in our questions. So I'm just gonna show you how this works. Once you click this, you can type in a question here. For instance, we can just put name, and then over here on the right, we can decide what kind of response we want. Short answer, paragraph, multiple choice. Obviously for name, we want a short answer. They can type in their name. Then we can click over here on add question on this little plus sign, and we can put another question. Let's try something that has multiple options. So maybe we'll try something like, you are interested in adopting, and then we can choose some, oh, it's really smart. It actually chose this for me. So you can choose multiple choice, and then you can say you are interested in adopting 1 kitten or 2 kittens, or maybe not sure. Now let's try one more kind of question, just so you really get the hang for it. Let's try describe a typical day in your home. This is a good long answer question, so we can go over here and select paragraph, and so on and so forth. Once you have sent this link out to people and they've applied, you can click over to responses and see all of your responses here. The other thing you can do is click create spreadsheet. So I'm going to create an adoption form responses spreadsheet, and I'm going to make sure This is for video only, otherwise I'm gonna get really confused later. Create. Okay, so check it out. This is what it's gonna look like. And when people apply, it's going to fill in all of the information automatically here. It's really, really helpful because then if you have, 10 applications, you can just look at all of them side by side and have all their contact information. So this is a super simple way to share your adoption application and to collect all of those responses. So what questions do we want to put in our application? The questions that I put might be different from the ones that you have, but let's go through mine and I will share with you why I ask some of the questions that I do. You want to ask questions that help you quickly get to know who this person is and what life for the cat will be like in their home. You don't want to ask too few questions, but you also don't want to ask so many that it becomes this exhausting process that people are just going to walk away from. So be really mindful about the questions you're asking and ask things that are really going to give you a good picture. We want to start with some basic information. Name, contact information, etc. So you know who this person is and how to get in touch with them. Then I like to start with just getting a picture of who is in the home. I ask for people to list the names and ages of people in the house. This isn't to rule anyone out, but it's important information to have because it's going to factor into the kind of conversation that I'll be having with the adopter. For instance, if there's an adult who's living with their parents, that's totally fine, but I want to then ask, what do the parents think about bringing this kitten home? Or if somebody says they have a young child in the home, that doesn't make them a good adopter or a bad adopter. It just means that during our conversation, I'm going to ask them about the child and how they plan to integrate and introduce the child and the cat and how are they going to make that safe for both of them. I also ask about the animals currently living in the home, including species and age. This is important for the conversation too. Let's say they have 3 dogs and a cat. I might decide to ask them about the dynamic between the dogs and the cat and how they plan to keep everyone safe as they integrate them. Or maybe they say they have no cats and they want 1 kitten. I'll flag that and see if they are open to a pair, since kittens really do best in a home with another feline friend. You can ask them to describe the personality of the animals to give you a feel for the dynamic, but a lot of the time the conversation is where that really comes out. Next up, I like to ask about history with animals. A simple question will do, like, tell me about animals you've cared for in the past. I do ask if the applicant has ever relinquished an animal to a shelter, but saying yes is not a rule out. It's more about hearing the person's story and frame of mind. There's a big difference between saying, 10 years ago I rehomed a cat, versus saying, yeah, last week I surrendered my cat to the shelter because I wanted to get a new kitten. Again, this question is really about just getting to know a person and where their frame of mind is. Next, you can ask a series of quick questions. These are those multiple choice or yes or no questions. Some of the quick questions I like to ask are things like, are you adopting for yourself or someone else? In general, it's a good idea to have the person who's going to be adopting be the person who's applying. I also ask, is everyone in the home on board with adopting? You can put yes, no, or not everyone knows. To me, it's important that the whole home be in agreement. Do you rent or own your home? They can select from owning or renting and they can have animals, renting and they can't have animals, renting and they're not sure. It's a good idea to know if this is a person who is allowed to have animals in the home. The cats will be indoor, outdoor, indoor-outdoor, indoor with supervised outdoor time. There are a lot of different philosophies on whether cats should be indoor, outdoor, indoor-outdoor. For me personally, with our rescue, we adopt out to indoor homes, but we highly encourage supervised outdoor time in something like a catio or even harness training and taking your cat on a walk. Do you intend to declaw the cat? Yes, no, or I'm not sure. Hopefully, if you're watching this, you know that declawing is mutilation of cats' paws, and it's a very cruel thing to do to a cat. But not everybody knows that. So I like to put yes, no, and not sure, and not sure should not be a rule out. For me, it's just a conversation I'm having. Some of my best adopters have selected I'm not sure, and then I'm able to have a conversation with them and educate them, and they pretty much always say, oh my gosh, thank you for telling me that. I would never do that to a cat. This is why conversations are so important, because you don't want to just assume that you understand someone's frame of mind just from a box that they selected. Conversations are gonna help a lot here. I like putting 1 kitten or 2 kittens so I know if this is an application for a solo or a pair. You could also ask if there's a specific kitten the person is applying for. But honestly, sometimes we get 10 applications for 1 kitten and none for another kitten. And I will then reach out to 9 of the people who applied and say, hey, the kitten that you applied for has been adopted, but we have these other kittens. Are you interested in them? Typically, people are just interested in any kitten. Now let's talk about those open-ended questions. I love open-ended questions that really give the applicant an opportunity to paint a picture of life in their home. For instance, you can ask, describe what a typical day will be like for the cats in your home. Another question I love is, what makes you a great adopter? These are really broad questions, and that's often where people have the chance to shine. Another question I like is, how long have you been thinking about adopting, and why is now the right time? I also ask, what factors could cause you to give up an animal? This is an important one because it helps you understand their mindset, some of their potential challenges, and their feelings about commitment. It's also a great place to find things that you might want to ask about in your follow-up conversation. And then I put the question, what will you do if you can no longer keep the animal? This is one of the most important ones for me. And of course, I love when people say, oh, that would never happen in a million years. Animals are family, we keep them for life. But I do like to understand someone's support system and what they would do in, an unforeseen circumstance. So this is a place where you're giving people the opportunity to say, oh, I would contact this family member or this friend, or here's my contingency plan in case of an emergency. And finally, I do recommend putting a place where you just ask, is there anything else you'd like to share? Personally, I recommend against putting anything in your application that's going to be overly restrictive or punitive. For instance, home checks used to be a really popular idea, and now most organizations have rightly done away with that. Instead, most organizations focus on those wonderful conversations-based adoptions. It's important to know the difference between what is a deal breaker for you and what is not a deal breaker for you. Don't let your ideas about perfection get in the way of adopting an animal out into a perfectly good home. For instance, I've heard of organizations that will say, oh, we will never adopt out to somebody who feeds their cats dry food. To me, I think that's overly restrictive. The purpose of adoptions is not to find this perfect person that you have in your mind. The purpose is to save lives. And keep in mind that when you're having these conversations, it's an amazing opportunity to educate people. A lot of applicants just don't have the experience with cats that you do. So give people a chance, and remember that every conversation is an opportunity to educate people about how to make the right choices for their animals. I highly recommend that you look at applications not as something that you're approving or denying based on their responses, but that you're just simply using the application as a guide for the conversation. And don't look at it with fear. Look at it assuming the best and being open to a conversation as long as there are no serious red flags. Obviously, if there's a serious red flag, you're not going to be having a conversation. Once you have an application in that you like, I recommend reaching out to the person and just saying, hey, I'd love to have a 15-minute follow-up phone call with you. And I make that call really pleasant and simple. It's not an interrogation, it's just a conversation. It's a getting to know you. I'll usually start the call by saying, hey, thank you for your interest. Then I'll usually tell them some fun information about the kitten. For instance, I'll say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited that you're interested in Fluffy. She is lounging in the sunshine right now, just purring and making biscuits. I know that you will absolutely love her. I'm really excited to talk with you about her. Then I'll move on to asking questions based on their application. So this is your chance to ask them anything you want based on what you read from them, within reason, of course. For instance, a follow-up question might be something like, you mentioned that you travel sometimes for work. Can you talk me through who watches your animals when you're away? If you're nervous about these conversations, just write notes from the application and you can put it in a format like this. You mentioned X in your application. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Let them talk first, then give them some of your own ideas. Another question I love to ask on the phone, usually at the end of the conversation, I'll say something like, obviously nobody knows what the next 20 years hold, but there's lots of life changes that can happen. Relationships, job opportunities, moving to different homes. Talk me through how you envision having a cat during all of the changes that life can bring. Where do cats fit in? I really love that question, and I think it helps a lot with getting to know someone. At the end, I always ask if they have any questions for me, and I answer those questions with a smile on my face. I keep these conversations light and joyful and do it all in the spirit of education. Even if this person does not end up adopting from you, ultimately they can walk away from that conversation knowing more about cats and kittens than they did before the conversation. So that's still a win. By the end of the conversation, I generally know if it's a yes or a no. You should be saying yes way more than you're saying no. Be realistic about what is a deal breaker. For me, a deal breaker is something like a serious welfare issue or safety issue. In most cases, people are lovely and maybe they need a little bit of guidance, which you can always give. As for the adoption itself, I of course recommend that you adopt your kittens out after they are 8 weeks old, spayed or neutered, vaccinated, dewormed, and in general good health. Please provide adopters with information about the importance of their booster shots and other things that they'll need to do, like registering microchips or anything else that you're recommending. Ultimately, everybody does adoptions differently, but I hope that learning about how I do mine has given you some ideas that you can use. Thank you for fostering, and best of luck finding fantastic forever homes for your kittens.